Hey everybody, welcome to HBCU Game Day. We have a really special conversation coming up in just a second, but before we get to that, don't forget Cross Colors, the official clothier of HBCU Game Day. We have a special discount code at our website. Just go to hbcugameday.com. You can look good this fall. I mean, look at this. Who wouldn't want a nice two-part hoodie this fall? All right, let's get to business here. We are talking about Howard University, and joining me today is Dr. Patrick Plummer, along with Jasmine Burton. Dr. Plummer is in the psychology department, and congratulations to Jasmine, recently graduated from Howard Law, which is hard enough. And then in the middle of a pandemic, I think you should get extra credit for that, Jasmine. So congratulations to you. Dr. Plummer, thank you for joining us. And the reason we are here, earlier this year, Mackenzie Scott donated $40 million to Howard University and to some other HBCUs as well. She spread her money out quite well this year. And it created a conversation that Jasmine really spearheaded on our website when she wrote an open letter that says, hey, how about athletics get a little bit of the coin there from the donation? And we had someone else who had a differing of an opinion, not so fast as Dr. Plummer. So this isn't one of those conversations where it's going to be a lot of smoke. It's going to be a great conversation. And I think we will volley to you first, Jasmine. Why so strong? And why did you come out with the open letter of your opinion that athletics should get some of that money that was donated to Howard University?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your warm introduction as well. I think what prompted my initial passion was just the fact that we had received such a sizable donation from Ms. Scott, and the fact that I believe that based on how large it was, it could be allocated to multiple departments within Howard. And I remember, since being an athlete at UVA, how important I believe athletics is in spearheading social movements and the voices of athletes and how important they are. And I think that athletics is such a profitable industry. And I think Jamel Hill kind of started the conversation about what would happen if more Black athletes started to attend Howard. And so when we received this donation, I was like, this is the perfect time to maybe kind of start the conversation. And I remember President Frederick was reaching out to students, asking for student requests on where the money should go. But in the Zoom meetings, you would only have about 30 seconds each student to make your pitch. And my pitch was just a bit longer than 30 seconds. So I was like, I'm going to maybe just write a letter. And if there's one thing I can do, it's write. I love to write. I have my own personal blog. And so I just felt like I could articulate myself well. And so I felt like the prevailing argument kind of always was that Black athletes needed to come, but we never kind of listed the steps and how to do so. And I don't believe that it's necessarily the athlete's first step, especially asking a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds. Like, people don't commit their senior year. People commit usually as sophomores and juniors sometimes, a lot of the time in football. You know, they're coming at these people freshman year. And it's difficult to get young students to, I guess, understand the importance of coming to HBCUs. So I was like, what are ways that maybe we can entice more athletes to come to our schools? And so that's, I guess, what really prompted it, was more so that President Frederick was requesting student opinion. And I just felt like I could better articulate mine by writing. And I think that's, the basis of why I began writing it.
Now, Dr. Plummer, you're not against sports, but your position is, hey, we have some things in front of the line that we need to get to that have needed addressing for quite a while. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but is that close to your position?
I think that's probably an accurate assessment, an accurate description. Like you said, I am a supporter of college sports and college athletics, and I certainly, so after reading the letter, I totally agree that significant change could be made if college athletes started to prioritize going to HBCUs. But I do think that there are other aspects of HBCUs broadly and at Howard specifically that could use some ramping up, particularly things that would benefit all of the students. So not just our men and women who are student athletes, but students of all persuasions and all interests. So some examples would be allocating resources to things like building up computer labs and research infrastructure, because Howard, in addition to being having great athletic programs, is a top tier research university. And in addition to bolstering our athletics infrastructure, I think it is important to prioritize and focus on how we can make sure that Howard is a learning environment that will lead to success for all students, and how learning tools can be brought in to campus that would make sure that their experience here is as good as you could get at any other university, from the best universities. And that will, I think, do some of the work of attracting not only student athletes, but students of all kinds, students with all interests.
Dr. Plummer, let me ask you this. When we think about athletics, there's all these wish lists that are out in public. I wish I had a bigger stadium. I wish I had a practice facility. I wish we had a dedicated training table. We all kind of know those things because sports is so far in the forefront of the conversation many times. But you as a professor, what type of things do you talk about? Like, boy, I wish I had only if I had boy, I really could use what are those type of things for you?
Well, like I mentioned, there are things that I think would benefit all the students. So revamping, remodeling, and sometimes, and in some cases, replacing the facilities on campus. I would, for my personal research, I'm actually lucky it's not that expensive, but I do think funding research facilities is an important step in making sure that HBCUs stay on top of the game. And I don't want to digress too far, but one reason I think it's important to invest, particularly in research, is I think with things that are going on now, it's everyone's responsibility to try to address these problems and these issues. But I think that HBCUs and Howard in particular are particularly well suited to address these problems that have to do with racial disparities and health outcomes, racial disparities in justice and policing, and outcomes and all other social domains. So putting money into a research infrastructure in the HBCU community could help bring a lot of intellectual resources to bear on these problems. And like I said, I think that these things should be happening at all kinds of universities. But I know at HBCUs like Howard, it's not just the faculty and the staff and the researchers and scientists and academics who are concerned with these things. It's also the students. I know that there is great passion for these causes in the student body, just as much passion for the sports.
Jasmine, let me ask you this. Do you believe in the theory that, as you build your athletic program, the money, the notoriety, the popularity, that kind of will raise all ships in the yard, so to speak?
Yeah, I do. And I hate sounding like the whole trickle down thing. Like if you give it to athletics, it'll trickle down to other. But I do feel like investing in athletics would create a continuous chain of revenue. And I actually think Dr. Plummer and I are kind of in the same boat, just a little bit on just wanting some of the money that, is coming out of that sizable donation. Like, for example, Howard is the only hospital, or the only Howard Hospital is the only one in DC that serves people that still don't have healthcare. So because of that, our hospital operates at a giant deficit. So a lot of the money we receive goes automatically to the hospital. So other organizations and groups are kind of left without substantial funding. So I was kind of like, what is a way that we can raise a large portion and create a continuous chain of revenue so that we can offset those losses a bit? And I just think that investing in athletics, specifically men's basketball, would be kind of the way to start, especially with how much power that I think that Black athletes' voices have nationally. And HBCU enrollment in general is decreasing drastically within the last few years. So I was like, what brings people together more than college sports? But just in general, men's basketball makes up 90% of the NCAA revenue. So even as a volleyball player, I was working my butt off, but we wasn't making no money. So with men's basketball, you just kind of see an immediate return on your investment. And then you find out that like what is it, 56% of the athletes that comprise these teams nationally are Black. And being from a school like UVA, which you think has a substantial amount of funding, every school in the ACC would have to shut down if they didn't have athletic revenue. We operate at an HBCU at Howard without substantial athletic revenue. Imagine, if we've been keeping our heads barely above water, if we have, more athletes coming to HBCUs, we would be substantially above water with money to give all of these other groups. But also I'm in complete agreement with Dr. Plummer about money going to research in general, because then we can see, how to bring more students or how to do certain things or how to make other departments succeed. So I completely agree with you on the research aspect of things and giving even money to create computer labs and things like that. But I do think that would be just more possible by investing in athletes. And, the donation is so large that, even giving us $8 million would be substantial. And you're still able to give these other departments the same amounts of, money as well. But I do think that by the way that I know that we're profoundly different from a lot of PWIs, but the way that I've seen it, athletics does create a lot of revenue, especially, for example, if Howard were to win a national championship. Howard wouldn't be the only school to receive money. Every school in the MEAC would. So that's large portions of funding to all HBCUs, which I think is a really cool thing that one cool thing that the NCAA does is just spreading the wealth. So,
Jasmine, let me ask you this. You played volleyball at the University of Virginia before coming to Howard Law. When you were on campus at Howard, being accustomed to athletics at the ACC and a Power 5 level, what were some of the immediate things you noticed, like, whoa, this is different, or, oh, I never thought that they didn't have this or that once you were on campus?
I was actually offered a scholarship to play volleyball at Howard. And I remember coming to campus, and the only reason I chose UVA was because I wanted to compete at a higher level and with better facilities, if I'm being honest. The only law school that I applied to was Howard. I had idealized going there for undergrad, but you get to the facilities and it's difficult when you go and you walk into John Paul Jones, and then you go toward UNC and you're walking into, all of these amazing facilities. And just, I feel like because white institutions are so profitable from athletics, they treat their athletes really well. Like, there was a level of respect and reverence that I felt for what I was doing that I didn't necessarily experience. I guess when I toured a few HBCUs, I just think that now it's even a much larger conversation of people even being involved in athletics, like people not just playing, but students going to games, students wanting to go to games. Like, the whole athletic experience at these schools is just completely different. And I think that's why some athletes choose other institutions, is because they look at these schools, but the way that they invest in athletes isn't very similar. And I know that we don't have the financial means to do so, but maybe now we can show athletes like, hey, we care, like, we're going to try to improve your facilities, or, you don't spend your time on the court, you spend your time in the locker room in between practice on 3-a-days. So you go into the locker room and you want to have an area where you can rest in between classes and things like that. Like, I think it's really those things, like the smaller things, like, or even gear. Your school is, just the gear that you give athletes, or maybe the locker room, or just attention that's paid. I think there's the biggest glaring differences that I've seen at UVA in comparison to HBCUs.
Dr. Plummer, if students who prospective students who might be visiting, I don't know, Georgetown, Howard, a mixture of schools, is that the same experience possibly, where they might be interested in Howard, but maybe academic infrastructure might be different than some of these air quotes bigger schools? Can that be the same experience for students who aren't athletes?
Well, yeah, I can't speak to their, personal experiences, but there are discrepancies. So some of our facilities are in need of renovation and repair, particularly now when there are concerns over our safety, student safety, and making sure you're maintaining a healthy and safe campus environment. So I would like to see good ventilation and air conditioning in all the rooms. And for Howard specifically, you have to, one thing to remember is that it's a 153-year-old institution. It's partly a museum. So there are historical landmarks. So there may be a discrepancy in, I would say, the level of resources that are available to students. But I would argue that places like Howard can make up for that lack with the specific kinds of intellectual resources that we have and the kinds of research that you're likely to be doing at a place like Howard, and what kind of interest you can generate for the questions that are maybe relevant to you as a young scholar or a young athlete. So I also wanted to mention that some of the funding has been already allocated to supporting students in need, in financial need. So that was probably for the last question, but I did want to bring that up, and that's an important thing that contributes to campus health. So when all of the students are happy and secure financially and feeling safe, I think it makes for a better community, and they're probably more likely to be interested in sporting events. Or be available or afford to go out and do those things. So you might, I have spent plenty of my career at predominantly white institutions or not, at least not predominantly Black institutions. And there are differences in what is available. And that's a reality. But we do have something to offer that I don't think can be replicated at other universities.
Jasmine, go ahead.
I completely agree with Dr. Plummer on that. The education that I received at Howard, specifically, even in high school, I never realized, I never had a Black professor, a Black teacher, and then you get here and you're learning from people that go through similar experiences. I think is just so beautiful. And I think that message we get across to students as well. And we need to continue to get that across, because I do think that the education that we receive here is so profoundly different than anything that you could receive, at another university. And what you said is interesting about landmarks, because you can't renovate historical landmarks. So a lot of the times, I know my volleyball gym, we didn't play in John Paul Jones. It was Memorial Gymnasium, and it was without air conditioning, because you can't add air conditioning, to a landmark. So I think some of the things, I definitely agree with like a lot of the things that you were saying in just regards to them. But I think that my main thing is with this sizable donation, I think that we HBCUs have kind of gotten away with being able to say that underfunding was an excuse. And I think that misappropriation of funds is kind of an issue as well. And just accountability on where the money goes. So like if we were to give research department money, my apologies, I would want some sort of accountability about where each of the dollars are going to make sure the research department actually sees that money. I know the law school got an endowment for a Pauli Murray's building. We got a suite. So I'm like, where did that $5 million go? It's just one room we got instead of a building. So I definitely think that that's another thing we need to put just pressure on, is making sure that when these departments do receive this money, that maybe we have like someone set in charge that's making sure that the money actually goes there and is allocated to those things,
Yeah, well, that is absolutely, I agree. That is supremely important. And I trust that with the leadership that we have in place, that these funds will be used obviously in the right way, and there will be full transparency and accountability. And I know that there is genuine interest in making sure that the students are along for the ride, and this in a strategic plan that we have at the university to continue our pursuit of excellence.
Jasmine, I will let you have the final word on our conversation today. And Dr. Plummer, along with Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us here at HBCU Gameday. You might have made this point earlier, but just again, for clarity, what dollar amount do you think would be satisfactory, or what percentage of a gift like 40 million, in your opinion, should go to athletics?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. I think I definitely think upwards of 5 million. Based on the 40 million, I know that they're giving about, I think 12 to 18 to the hospital is from what I heard. That could be wrong, but just even we would be getting about, like a third of that or a fourth of that. So I think 5 million would be nice, but that's to the athletic department as a whole, not specifically just men's basketball or men's football, with obviously a majority portion going to the sports that bring in the most revenue. And that's coming from a female athlete, by the way. I want to make that very clear. I know a lot of people say that female athletes don't get a lot of funding, but I do think that we work as hard, we do deserve funding, but these two sports in particular, could bring in so much revenue, specifically with how many Black male athletes are in those sports. And I just think by even just showing that you're investing, I think that that's a statement in itself. And just showing athletes, hey, look, we care. We're giving money to these things. We just received a donation and we're giving you a portion. And same with the psychology department or even academic research in general. Even making a donation can just say, hey, we care. We're thinking about you. We're wanting to give you some money. We're wanting to improve this. And I think that outside of the money, that gesture in itself will mean a lot to students to come and athletes to come.
All right. She's Jasmine Burton. Congratulations again. Graduate now of Howard Law School, and Dr. Patrick Plummer from the psychology department. Thank you guys so much for joining us for a very, very, very good conversation here on HBCU Game Day.
Thank you very much for having me.